Good evening, comrades. I'm going to argue here that communism has never been more important. Communism is an absolutely fundamental human need. I'm using the term here, communism, partly because I wish to reclaim it, as I'll explain, but also because Marx and Engels use the terms communism, socialism, and a number of other snappy terms like the freely associating society of producers quite interchangeably. So I'm making a bid to reclaim the term communism. Marx and Engels use them interchangeably and with socialism, and so do I. A communist society is one in which humanity becomes truly human for the first time in its written history. The fundamental change that would take place is not just simply to the mode of production, isn't just simply the way in which we make stuff. The fundamental change is to humanity itself. If you look through Marx and Engels' work, the project of socialism, the project of communism, is to actually transform society, just as it is part of what it is to be human, to change nature, and in so doing, we change ourselves. So communism is more important today than at any point, partly because we are literally on the verge of World War III. If you read the Communist Manifesto, one of the things you'll see, and it surprises some people, is an appreciation of what capitalism has achieved, in the sense of it being able to develop the forces of production to the point where we have effectively abundance. We already have abundance, and yet notwithstanding, vast areas of the world are living in desperate poverty. Areas of the world which were once far more developed, which were far more prosperous, are being turned into wastelands where people have no choice but to leave to seek some sort of better life, just to stay alive. Capitalism didn't come into being like some shiny new pin or a product of a gradual movement, but was itself ushered in revolutionary upheavals in England in the 1640s, in France in the 16th century. Communism is impossible in the context of a single country. So we're looking at a world society without borders, without frontiers, in which we fully develop the whole of humanity. So all production should be to meet human need. So we're looking at the abolition, effectively, of commodity production in favour of a rationally planned system of production to fulfil human needs. Now, by planning, what we don't mean is what existed in the Soviet Union. When you have a bureaucratically planned society, what you end up with is something which is even less efficient than capitalism. Unless you have the direct participation of the producers themselves, it's very difficult to actually know what it is that needs to be produced. Most people in their ordinary working lives can see the importance of this. Wherever you may work, whatever you do, you find yourself constantly at the behest of managers who use a top-down approach. And for most people, that produces an intolerable situation, both at work, but also it is less efficient. Without that genuine participative democracy, planning is absolutely impossible, because it's only really as producers that we can know fully what needs to be done. So planning has to be differentiated in the socialist sense from what had existed in the Soviet Union. Historically, we know this has taken place. The Paris Commune of 1870-71, in the Russian Revolution, the Soviets sprang up spontaneously in 1905 and again in 1917, and workers' councils, of course, in the German Revolution. The form that democracy will take in the future may be completely different. But nevertheless, we have to be absolutely clear that as socialists, we stand for the democracy and the decision-making by the working class itself. The liberation of all humanity is the act of the workers themselves. We already live in a society of abundance. If you think about how many people do jobs which are completely pointless, such as the police, the army, or whatever, that produces no useful, tangible gain for humanity. When you think about the numbers of jobs which could be effectively turned to meeting human need, it doesn't take too much imagination. If you think of all of banking and finance, which actually creates nothing of worth. I mean, even within the context of capitalism, finance capital operates as a parasitic form on industrial capital. We could have a society where, for example, the amount of necessary labour was no more than about 10 hours a week. If you were doing 10 hours a week in some sort of useful labour, one of the things that was interesting with Marx was people would say, well, to him, well, who will go down the drains? Or Marx's usual terse response was, you will. But in fact, look, there are always going to be jobs that have to be done. And moreover, jobs which actually meet human need. I'm going to try and focus a little bit in a moment on something kind of direct and tangible, such as human health. And if you think about the current crisis in health and social care, how many people would be in a position to help in health and social care if the organisation of that was completely different? The base of economic society in capitalism shapes that superstructure. So the organisation, for example, of healthcare in the context of capitalism is actually not healthcare at all, but, if you like, disease care. So the whole aim then of communism is actually the realisation of human potential, not just simply changing the means of production, but moving to a society where all production is to meet human need and to the full realisation of what it is to be human. So in looking at what communism is, what it isn't, of course, is Stalinism. The organisations that we need cannot be anti-democratic. We've lived through a situation where many of the organisations on the left have frequently been more Stalinist than the Stalinists. We are for democracy, and we are for discussion, and we're for the development of an internationalist position. Another thing that communism most definitely isn't is about state control. Ultimately, a communist society will see the end of the state in all its forms, the withering away of the state. The idea that the NHS, for example, is a kind of little island of socialism in a capitalist sea is absurd. If you look at what the NHS developed from it, there was an NHS before the NHS, a hodgepodge of poor law institutions that were funded by out of the rates, often organised on a county-wide basis, including the asylums. And what you had in 1948 is the nationalisation and rationalisation of that, and turning it into a society where healthcare is free at the point of delivery, which I am completely in favour of. I would defend the NHS with my life. Part of a socialist programme was that the distribution is according to need. You don't get an equal amount of healthcare, you get the healthcare you need, in just the same way that you get the housing you need, or you get the transport you need, or whatever else. The idea is that the NHS could be something completely different in the context of a communist society, one in which was under democratic control. In conclusion, the point about communism from my point of view, from the point of view of this group, I believe, is that the realisation of communism will be the realisation of what it is to be truly human.